I almost didn't go in that day. The parking lot was packed, and I had exactly 40 minutes before I needed to be back at the office. I almost just turned around. I told my brother I'd drop it off tomorrow, and went back to eating my sad desk sandwich like every other Tuesday. But I didn't. I went in, and what happened in that repair shop changed everything I thought I knew about my family. Let me back up. My brother. I'll call him my older brother because that's what he is. The person who taught me to ride a bike and helped me move into my first apartment, he'd been having trouble with his laptop for weeks. Screen flickering. Random shutdowns. The whole thing. He lives about 40 minutes from me. And the repair shop near my place has a good reputation. So he asked if I could drop it off on my lunch break. No big deal. I said sure. I walked in, handed it over to the guy at the counter. His name tag said Marcus and gave him my brother's name and number for contact. Standard stuff. Marcus looked it over, asked a few questions about the symptoms, and told me it'd probably be ready in 2 to 3 days. I nodded, grabbed the claim ticket, and was already mentally back at my desk. Then he opened it, not to be nosy. He just needed to run a quick diagnostic check before I left. He explained. To see if it would even power on. It did power on. And when the screen lit up, a browser window was already open. Marcus didn't say anything at first. He just kinda went still. That particular stillness that people get when they're reading something they weren't supposed to see and they don't quite know what to do about it. I noticed because I was still standing there, car keys in hand. And I watched his expression shift from professional neutral to something much harder to read. He looked up at me. Is this your laptop? He asked. My brother's. I said. I'm just dropping it off for him. He looked back at the screen, then back at me. Then he turned the laptop around so I could see it. I didn't understand what I was looking at. Not immediately. It was a document. Columns. Numbers. A name at the top that it took me a full 3 seconds to recognize. My father's name. Marcus spoke quietly, like he didn't want the other customers to hear. I've seen documents like this before. He said, I'm not a lawyer, but you might want to read that carefully before you leave. I read it. My hand started shaking somewhere around the 3rd paragraph. My father is 71 years old. He had a stroke 2 years ago, mild. The doctors said. He recovered well, but since then, he's had some memory issues. Nothing severe. He forgets appointments sometimes. Repeats himself occasionally. Loses his keys more than he used to. The doctors said it was normal aging, accelerated by the stroke. We were all keeping an eye on it. What was on that screen was a document related to a legal petition. A petition to have my father declared legally incapacitated, and the person filing it was my brother. I stood there in that repair shop and read my brother's name on a legal document designed to take away my father's right to make decisions for himself. Designed to hand control of my father's finances. His healthcare. His home. To my brother. Completely. Legally. Permanently. Marcus handed me a sticky note and a pen without being asked. I wrote down everything I could see on that screen before my hands shook too badly to write anymore. I drove back to the office on autopilot. I sat at my desk and stared at my computer for 20 minutes without touching it. Then I picked up my phone and called my father. He answered on the 2nd ring. His voice was warm and familiar and completely unaware of what I had just seen. He asked if I'd eaten lunch. I told him yes. I asked if he was okay. He said of course. Why wouldn't he be? I told him I loved him. He laughed a little and said he loved me too and asked if everything was all right. Everything's fine. I said, I'll come see you this weekend. I hung up and sat very quietly and thought about what I was going to do next. Here's what I knew. My brother had a document on his laptop related to a legal petition for guardianship over our father. I did not know how far along the process was. I did not know if my father knew. I did not know if there was more other documents, other plans, other people involved. I knew almost nothing. What I did know was this: I could not call my brother and ask him about it. Not yet. If I tipped him off before I understood the full picture, he could delete everything, accelerate the timeline, or do something I hadn't anticipated. I'd read enough about situations like this, financial elder abuse. I now knew it was called to know that the moment you show your hand too early, things can move very fast in the wrong direction. So I did the thing that felt deeply unnatural to me. I said nothing. I went home. I made dinner. I went to bed. And in the morning, I started making calls. The first person I called was a woman I'd met through work. She was a paralegal at a firm that handled estate law. I explained the situation carefully, leaving out my brother's name for the moment. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment and then said, "Okay, here's what you need to understand." She walked me through it. A guardianship petition, if successful, would give my brother legal authority over my father's person and estate. My father would lose the right to manage his own finances, make his own medical decisions, even decide where he lived. It wasn't automatic. It required a court process, a medical evaluation, a judge's approval, but if no one contested it, if my father didn't have anyone advocating for him, it could move through the system with relatively little friction. "The most important thing right now," she said, "is to find out how far along this is. And the second most important thing is to make sure your father has his own attorney." I asked her if she could recommend someone who handled elder law specifically. She gave me 2 names. That weekend, I went to see my father like I'd promised. I didn't tell him why I was really coming. I just showed up with groceries and his favorite coffee and spent the afternoon with him the way I normally would. We watched a game show he liked. He showed me the tomatoes he was growing in the backyard. He seemed fine, sharp, present. Himself? At one point, I steered the conversation gently toward his finances. I asked, casually, if he'd done anything recently with his bank accounts or his will. He said no. Nothing recent. I asked if anyone had talked to him lately about his future arrangements, a phrase vague enough not to alarm him. He said no. Not really. Though he mentioned that my brother had been asking more questions than usual lately. About the house. About what my father's monthly income looked like. I kept my expression neutral. I asked what kind of questions. "Oh, just curious things," my father said, waving his hand. He said he was trying to help me plan. I didn't think much of it. I stayed another 2 hours. Before I left, I hugged him longer than usual. He patted my back and told me not to worry so much. I drove home and cried in the parking garage for about 10 minutes. Then I wiped my face and went upstairs and wrote down everything he'd told me. The following week, I met with one of the elder law attorneys the paralegal had recommended. Her name was Patricia, and she had the kind of calm, direct manner that immediately made me feel like I was in capable hands. I brought everything I had: the notes from the repair shop, the things my father had said, a timeline I'd put together of recent interactions between my brother and my father going back about 8 months. She reviewed everything carefully. The pattern here is consistent with what we see in financial elder abuse cases, she told me. The groundwork is laid: gradually increased access, building financial dependency, planting doubt about the elder's capacity. The guardianship petition is usually the final step. She asked if I had any direct evidence that my father's accounts had already been accessed or altered. I didn't. Not yet. She told me that would be important to establish. She also told me that my father needed to be evaluated by a geriatric neurologist, not because we believed he was incapacitated, but because having an independent professional assessment on record would directly counter any claim that he lacked capacity. If your brother has filed, or is planning to file, she said. The court will order an evaluation anyway. But if we initiate one independently, from your father's own attorney, it signals that he has representation and that any claim of incapacity will be contested. She explained that I had legal standing to raise concerns about a guardianship petition affecting my father, but that the most powerful thing we could do was ensure my father had his own independent counsel. We talked about how to approach my father with all of this. I was terrified of upsetting him, or of not being believed. Patricia reminded me that my father was an adult with full legal rights, and that ultimately, the decision to fight this had to be his. Bring him in, she said. Let him hear it directly. Don't filter it too much. He deserves to understand what's happening. I brought him in the following Tuesday. I picked him up and told him I had someone I wanted him to talk to. Someone who could help him make sure his affairs were in order. He agreed easily. He'd been meaning to update some things anyway. He said, when Patricia laid it out for him, not dramatically, just clearly and factually. My father was quiet for a long time. He asked her to repeat certain parts. He asked me if I had really seen those documents on the laptop. I said yes. He looked out the window for a moment. Then he said, "How long has this been going on?" Patricia told him that based on what I'd described, the preparation had likely been underway for at least several months. My father nodded slowly. He asked me to sign something a few months ago. He said it was just a healthcare proxy update. Standard stuff. I signed it. Patricia asked if he had a copy. He didn't. But she told him we could request it. What that document turned out to be was not a standard healthcare proxy. It was a durable power of attorney significantly broader in scope that my brother had had prepared by an attorney in another county and presented to my father without explanation of what it actually authorized. My father had signed away substantial financial authority without knowing it. When we understood the full scope of what had already been transferred, my father's face went through several expressions I had never seen on him before. Anger. Yes. But something underneath it that was harder to watch, a kind of grief. The grief of realizing that someone you love looked at you and saw an opportunity. He revoked the power of attorney. Patricia handled the filing. We documented everything. My brother called me 3 days later. He was casual, checking in, asking how I was doing. I kept my voice even. I said things were fine. He mentioned he was planning to visit Dad soon. I said that sounded nice. He didn't know yet that the legal ground had shifted under him. When he found out when he received the official notice that the power of attorney had been revoked and that my father had retained independent counsel, he called me back. This time his voice was different. He said I didn't understand the full picture. He said Dad needed help. Real help. More than I was willing to admit. He said he was trying to protect the family's interests. I let him finish. Then I said, Dad is represented by an attorney now. If you have concerns about his well-being, you're welcome to raise them through the appropriate legal channels. He hung up. What followed was several months of legal process, the kind that is exhausting and expensive and emotionally grinding even when you're on the right side of it. My brother did attempt to proceed with the guardianship petition. Patricia's firm contested it. The independent neurological evaluation came back. Clearly, my father did not meet the legal standard for incapacity. He was aging. Yes. He had some memory challenges, but he was entirely capable of managing his own affairs with appropriate support. The petition was denied. In the months that followed, we also pursued the matter of the power of attorney. My father had signed a document whose full implications had not been explained to him. That's not a small thing legally. Patricia connected us with an attorney who specialized in financial elder abuse cases, and that process is still ongoing as of today. I can't share the details, but I can tell you it is moving in the right direction. My father still grows tomatoes in the backyard. He still watches game shows. His memory has good days and harder days, as the doctors told us it would. On the good days, he sometimes asks me about the case. Wants updates. I give them to him. He has the right to know. My brother and I don't speak. I won't pretend that doesn't cost something. Because it does. There's a version of my family that I grieve, the version where this never happened. Where the person I thought my brother was, is the person he actually is. That version doesn't exist. I'm still figuring out what to do with that. What I come back to, when I'm trying to make sense of it, is Marcus in that repair shop. The way he went still. The way he turned the screen toward me, not because he had to, but because he made a quiet decision to do the right thing for a stranger. He didn't know my family. He didn't know what any of it meant. He just saw something that looked wrong and he said something. I went back to pick up the laptop. A week later, my brother never came for it, and I thanked Marcus. He shrugged and said he hoped things worked out. I told him they were working out. Slowly. He nodded. Good. He said. That's good. If you're watching this and something about it feels familiar, if there's an elderly parent in your life, and someone who has been asking questions that seem a little too pointed about finances or healthcare or what things are worth, please don't wait for a stranger to turn a screen toward you. Check the documents your parents have signed recently. Make sure they understand what those documents authorize. Make sure they have people around them who are paying attention. And if you found out tomorrow that someone close to you had been building a case like this behind your back, would you confront them immediately? Or would you gather everything first? I'd really like to know what you think. Leave it in the comments. I read every single one.